So welcome to the Center Reef Nation podcast. This is Pat LaRusso, and I'm joined by a very special guest. We have two-time Stanley Cup winner, NHLer, former NHLer, Dan Carcillo. Welcome, Dan.
Thanks, brother. Yeah. How you doing?
I'm all right. I'm all right. These are some crazy times we're all living in.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, for sure. A lot of stress, a lot of fear, but I think it's a really good opportunity to kind of look inside and just create a relationship with ourselves and also, the people around us.
Yes, most
so
definitely.
It's, could be turned into a positive for sure.
Most definitely. How have your little ones been handling this major adjustment for them?
Yeah, I'm lucky. I've got kids that are, all under the age of 5, so really they don't quite understand what's going on, and I'm lucky to have some property so they can be in nature and run around and still be safe. But yeah, it's funny, they haven't left the house in quite some time here. So, but they're doing well.
That's good. That's good. Once again, thanks very much for giving us this time with you. I know you've been a pretty busy man with everything that's going on. I know you did your conference earlier on today, and you've been on and off with many different interviews. So definitely appreciate your time this evening.
Yeah, no worries, buddy.
So let's kind of just discuss what your journey's been like since you've retired. You've been a very busy man on a couple different fronts. Last fall I know, you were very big on social media with a lot of the hazing and a lot of the stories about Mike Babcock, Don Cherry, and some of the other big names in hockey. Sort of kind of just explain to our listeners, what was your journey like in hockey from your days in junior all the way through NHL, and kind of just like what were some of the signs and things that you saw? How did that impact you, and sort of what influenced that behavior as part of the quote-unquote hockey culture at the time?
Yeah, there's definitely been somewhat of a reckoning, really I call it just people telling the truth for the first time. And there's a lot more of these stories out there than what's out there right now, and I think that there's going to be more of them coming, and I think it really gives victims a voice, because for too long, I think Hockey Canada and USA Hockey and hockey in general has just been able to stifle these people and these stories because they use this fear of repercussion. If you talk against it, then your career's totally done. So that was no different with me coming up and learning the game of hockey through this fear-based mentality, and really, the coach's word is God, and what's said in the room stays in the room, and that breeds an atmosphere for abuse. And there were tough coaches, always yelling and that kind of thing, but really it didn't rise to the level of sexual, physical, and emotional abuse like it did when I got to Sarnia when I was 17, and really this coach, Jeff Perry, harbored this culture of abuse, and the veterans there sexually, physically, verbally abused us on a daily basis for over a year, and nobody stepped in, and you think it's normal, and so what happened was I played AA for most of my life, and I had a really great coach, and I can now look back on my career and recognize these signs and symptoms, and that I've had anxiety and depression, and was at times suicidal, but I was able to use the game as an emotional release, but really after I was abused like that as a minor, it changed me, totally changed me, and that's the persona that a lot of people see and know me as, is car bomb.
Yes.
And again, it's, just taking these things out, putting everything into a box, and really never thinking about it until I saw that St. Mike story. Yes. And then having to deal with my own PTSD from it, and really, but I was just at that point still coaching kids, but I was so fed up with hockey and hockey culture, and how, even as a coach, like my team was already picked for me and a couple kids shouldn't have even been on the team but their daddies were rich, and yes. They gave away free memberships, and just the price of everything, and just a whole bunch of factors, and I just said, well, for me to be happy and healthy, I need to tell the truth, and that's what I do now, is I just tell the truth, and raw and honest, and this is what my experience is like. It's not everybody's experience, but there's hundreds, there's thousands of them out there, and they've never been heard. So let's hear them now, yes. And so I think, going through my NHL career, those first 5 years from like 20 to 25 and just being toxic to the people around me and to myself and to teammates and not really having much success hockey-wise and really fracturing relationships with people that love me and that I love, but not, just not being able to really get a handle on it until I was 25 and I had to ask for help because the substance abuse became too much and I had, a couple surgeries back to back and got hooked on opiates that the doctors were prescribing me and I needed help, and so I took the time to ask for it and took 60 days in rehab in Malibu and then learned about this whole other life, which is like, that you can actually be conscious of every single action that you're making and to use breathing as a tool, to use yoga, to use mindfulness practices. You can slow your mind down by reading. You can learn new things. Like it was this whole other world that I'd never been introduced to because really the hockey world is just so insular. And after that, changing my diet and really taking a holistic approach and also staying away from substances and practicing a program which is radical. Just radically reviewing my day and making sure that I'm on the right path. And my last 5 years in the league, I went to the Stanley Cup Finals 4 times with 3 different teams, and that doesn't happen if you're living the wrong way and if people and organizations don't like what you're doing. And so that was a testament to living the right way, and my luck was a sure thing. And really, that was a great experience, and it's not who I am. It's not everything that I am, and I know that I'm more than just a hockey player. And I always say, I'm not the hockey player named Daniel. I'm Daniel who played hockey, and I think there's a difference there in that statement. And I think too often we sometimes get too caught up in the hockey player life and really losing who we are as a person, and then it becomes difficult if we want to transition out of the game because we think we're worthless, and usually most of us are broken and when we leave, not so much emotionally but physically with the brain trauma that nobody educates us on. And so I had to really relearn everything when I retired at 30 from post-concussive syndrome and really delve back in and understand the brain and understand why I was having these issues and light sensitivity, slurred speech, anxiety, depression, and then learning that, looking back at my career and being like, wow, it was there the whole time. It's just, nobody ever talked about it. And so then it's like, well, now I need to talk about it, again, like that it's cathartic and it's just telling the truth. And it's not about kids and parents not putting their kids in sport and current players, it's not to get them to quit. It's just to get them to have informed consent and get them the truth about the risks that they're under, and then they could make an informed decision.
Yes.
And then they're not able to come back and really complain that it didn't happen. But I think that should come from these leagues, especially the NHL. Anything the NHL does, everybody else adopts. And hockey the game was really great for me. It was a great tool, and I met some good people along the way, but that's definitely in my past life now. But I will continue to use the platform that I earned through all of the hard work that I put into it, and through all the trauma that I've sustained and been through, and turn it around into a positive. And now I'm at a position now where I'm grateful, and I'm able to share with TBI survivors and with the neurodegenerative community and veterans and first responders what worked for me.
Yes.
And that's really exciting. So now it's like, wow, I can say thank you to hockey. I can say thank you to Jeff Perry, and I can say thank you to the veterans when I was 17 who did that to me. That's real growth, and so, and now I'm a farmer, and I, farming my own medicinal mushrooms and cannabis and getting everybody this medicine and really these other tools. It's only one tool, is supplementation. There's a whole host of other tools like, intermittent fasting and making sure you're watching what you eat, and non-GMO, and staying away from refined white sugars, watching your alcohol intake. I mean, all those things are really, really, really important with, when we talk about brain health and quality of life. So that's a little bit of an overview.
No, that's that's actually really good. And I know, like I said, I've been following you now for a while now, and especially on Twitter. You drew a lot of heat back in the fall with a lot of this hazing stuff, and we'll deal with the mental health stuff. I think that needs its own little section later on in the interview. But with the hazing stuff, like you drew a lot of criticism. What made you, knowing that there was going to be some blowback, what made you want to kind of be one of those voices to, have a positive impact and change hockey from, within?
Yeah, I didn't wake up one day and say, "Oh, I'm gonna tell the story of when I was sexually, physically abused for a year." It was I read the story of the St. Mike's kid getting abused, and that triggered my PTSD, that trauma that I put in a box, and I had to deal with it. I was forced to face it, and then it was Bully Awareness Week, and I remember writing something out on Tuesday, and I didn't send it till Friday, and that was because I was just kind of fearful, but I just felt like I needed to say it. I felt like I needed people to understand. And then what happened was, people started reaching out, and other people started telling their stories. And I mean, man, that's amazing when you can give people the confidence and victims the confidence to take their power back. And so that's why I did it. And to be honest, to just, open my inbox to people that have suffered so that I could give them a platform, so that I could use my platform for them, so that they can be heard and people can start healing once they're heard. And so that was the biggest reason that I did it. And I understand why people are mad. It's, people are brainwashed, especially in Canada, thinking that, hockey's religion and hockey's everything, and you need hockey to be a manly man. And if you don't play hockey, well, you're a loser. And, you're not cool. And it's just, it couldn't be further from the truth. And, I think exposing people like Don Cherry for who they are, his rock and socking videos, and programming kids to go out and be trained assassins like I was, is something that he needs to step aside. And Mike Babcock, same thing, and Bill Peters, same thing. I mean, these coaches that coach off of fear-based mentality and learning, making a kid clench his stick and he's fearful of making a mistake, and when he does make a mistake, you belittle him in front of 20 other kids. It's just not. It is not the way to do it. And so, trying to usher in change, it's something that I'm passionate about, and I'll continue to give my opinion. And man, just moving forward in that manner. But really, it only comes up every once in a while. It's not like I'm trying to beat that drum too much anymore.
Yes.
It'll take care of itself.
Most definitely. And then, that kind of really takes us to the next topic, which I know is true, dear and true to you, is the mental health side of things, and all the concussions that you suffered, and what really ended up being, the repercussions of it. Looking back, when did you start to see the signs that something just wasn't right? Like, did you start feeling a difference in junior? Was it something that you started to see as you progressed through the NHL? Sort of, what was like the first signs that's like, man, like something's not right?
I think it was in 2013 when Steve Montador was the lockout year, and then Steve went to a clinic, the Carrick Institute, and he was begging me to go with him. I'm like, oh man, I'm not having any symptoms. Like, I'm totally fine. So, I mean, that's how you know that there's no education in the way of, like, what's going on with the brain and concussion. None of us are made aware of any mental health complications or any concussion symptoms. And when he came back and he was speaking differently, and I could see it in his eyes, he was outrunning me on the track. Like, everything, his autonomic system, so many things were optimized. I'm like, all right, I'll go.
Yes.
And so I went to this clinic, and it was 2013. It extended my career for 2 more seasons, or close to. And I mean, if I didn't go there, honestly, I don't think I would have played those next 2 seasons. I wouldn't have been healthy enough. And then I'm, just even then, like, not really realizing, shit, man, I've been suffering my whole career. But and it was the NHL. It was so tough, and none of the concussions happened in junior. All 7 were there in that league, and just not getting the proper understanding, diagnosis, and care is detrimental. And then you have guys retiring early, like Rick Nash, and it's not just enforcers. It's a lot of players now that you see walking away from the game.
Yeah, most definitely. You did bring up Steve Montador, and I know that was, a very dear friendship to you, and you just recently tweeted something, I think it was around the anniversary of his passing. How does what Steve went through factor into, your messaging and what you're trying to get out there? Like, how large of an imprint did he leave with you?
Yeah, I mean, Steve Marner was cleared for 19 concussions in the NHL.
Wow.
Just over 9 years he played. The Blackhawks cleared him for 4 concussions in 12 weeks, and that was his 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th concussion. And all the teams share medical records, so they knew what they were doing.
Yes.
And that killed him. And a year and a half later, he's dead, and nobody helped him. And so that, when Steve was going through that, it was my last year in the league, and I saw all the signs and symptoms in myself, and that scared me to death. And so after he passed, and the way that he passed, I just had to advocate, man. I had to advocate for change, and I was, so freaking hurt, and frustrated and sad and angry, and was scared that I was in the same position, and so his case, Steve's case, has the potential to change the world, to change the whole brain injury world, as we view sport concussion.
Yes.
And there's sport-related concussion, because there's no such thing. You don't hop in your car and get into a car accident and say, "Oh man, I got one of those car accident concussions."
Yes.
It just doesn't happen, and so I think getting people to understand who's really implementing the messaging, and and who these doctors work for that work for the sports leagues, and they don't really have our best interest in mind, and called sports doctors, sports medicine doctors, for a reason. They serve the sport before they serve the athlete. And I think just really being able to highlight that, and telling people, the God honest truth that, when you sign that dotted line, just know this, man, they don't care. And so you're going to have to do your own advocacy work when you're playing. You're going to have to stand up and say, "No, I'm not returning." But that's a really tough thing for an athlete, because if you do that, well, then somebody else takes your job. And so Steve's case, again, it could change the world, man. It really can, and it could bring on a big money settlement. And I don't care about money, and Steve's estate doesn't, because Steve's gone, and
yes.
No amount of money will ever bring him back. But what money does, what $100 million settlement does for the NHL, is they will have to change their protocols, because the NHL doesn't make that much money.
Yes.
They don't have a TV deal. Players are still paying high escrow, and that will make them change. And then once they change, guess what? All the lower leagues will change, and then parents can feel good about their kids signing up for the sport again. And specifically in the NHL, you treat the human being right. Well, guess what? You got an optimized athlete, and then what happens with optimized athletes and better athletes? You get to sell your product more, and you guys make more money. So everybody wins. But the human being has to win first and foremost.
Yes. Now, in around the same time of Steve's passing, there were other stories like Bogarts and Belaks and there were so many other players in around that same time. Did the NHL just look at each case as an isolated case, or did they start to see that they had a bigger problem and cover it up? What was their immediate reaction, from your opinion, to all these unique cases coming up all almost at the same time?
They didn't do anything. They didn't change the concussion baseline. I was still in the league when all those guys passed away, and they didn't do anything. They don't. That's the thing. The NHL sells this game, and hockey sells this game, and we're a family, and we're a community. And I mean, it just couldn't be further from the truth. When you're done, you're done.
Yeah.
Nobody calls you to see how you are. Nobody's there for you anymore. The NHLPA doesn't call you and ask if you need any help, and they don't help you understand why you're paying $2,400 in insurance, in health insurance every month, and they just don't care. And so I think that you just have to know that. You got to know that. And I'll be the martyr. I'll be the guy who won 2 Stanley Cups and tells the truth, and the truth is ugly.
Yes.
And I'll be the martyr. It's okay. But at least I know that I can lay my head on the pillow, and I'm not killing anybody, and trying to save people, from impending doom, and really just, there's a better way forward. I don't expect them to change and to adopt these thought patterns, but I really do it for parents, man. And I still have friends in the league, so I do it for them.
Yes.
And then, I'm able to use them the same way that this league used me. And I'm able to get to veterans and police officers and firefighters in these different communities, because, I've said it before. I don't care about winning 2 Stanley Cups. Like, I could really care less.
Yes.
But what that does is it opens a lot of doors and a lot of platforms, and so and I deserve that because I worked for it.
Yes.
You know, and so I'll use that platform in a good manner. You know, and to try to do good and yeah, help people, man. Help people mitigate suffering, recognize signs and symptoms, and then know where the treatment is.
Most definitely, and because you're on such a large platform, because of your name and your experience and the story, your own story that you've shared, have you had any feedback from players, say in football, or even some of these professional wrestlers, or other high impact sports where some of these athletes may have gone through similar stories? Like, are you starting to get some of those stories as well, and people reaching out to you for treatment, or what maybe they need to look out for themselves, or what has been the I guess people's outreach to you from outside of the hockey world and in all these other contact sports.
Yeah, so a bunch of the supplements. I'm coming out with the supplement line to help me regain my brain health. And we're in NASCAR, we're in the NFL, we're in the NHL, we're in the UFC, we're in a whole host of different places, and really just serving these high level trauma communities. Like the most rewarding work I do is with veterans and police officers and first responders and firefighters, paramedics, to just like have them realize that there's another way. They don't have to go home and drink themselves to sleep. They can, use these other tools to their advantage, and really they need them. And the thing is, like with me, I didn't know I was suffering, right, during my career because nobody told me. So the number one thing is to just advocate and then bring these other high-level trauma communities to the forefront and then help them.
Excellent, excellent. So then I guess that's kind of leading into that, because you did mention it right off the top that you're into farming and you're growing your own psychedelic mushrooms and marijuana and so on. How did you land on that as a potential treatment, and at what point did you kind of really start to see the positive effects of these non-traditional medicinal options?
Yeah. So first of all, there's a distinction between there's marijuana, which is high THC, and then there's a cannabinoid in the cannabis plant that's THC, and there's there's other cannabinoids like CBD and CBG, and so I think making that distinction. Then there's also, when I talk about medicinal mushrooms like lion's mane, reishi, cordyceps, chaga, that's different than when I talk about mushrooms containing psilocybin. So,
yes.
And then first and foremost, what I'm saying is just in my experience, and this is by no means any medical recommendations or anything. I'm just, telling people that this is an option. But I went to a farm 10 months ago to learn about CBD genetics and to get into farming because I really didn't have a purpose anymore. And then I was introduced to this ceremony, and it really saved my life. And then I delved into the research and all the science from Johns Hopkins University and the Imperial College of London and NYU really points to the neurogenesis properties of psilocybin containing mushrooms, as well as lion's mane, the medicinal mushroom, that doesn't have any hallucinogenic effects. And at the core of recovering brain health, it's flushing out inflammation, which is why I take CBD, which is 0.3% THC, so you don't get the high effect.
Yes.
And sometimes I do use THC before I go to bed to help me fall asleep, or if I'm having like a creative block during the day.
Yes.
And the CBD, along with the THC too, it has anti-inflammation, neuroprotectant properties that the U.S. government took a patent out in 2003. And so that's really helped me, flush out the inflammation in my brain. And then the mushrooms help me, both medicinal, and the psilocybin has helped me to, promote neurogenesis and stimulate the areas of my brain that have been shut down due to trauma. So it's a really great option. I implore people to just go out and do your research, and maybe it's for you and maybe it's not. But it's a really great way to break psilocybin mushrooms in traditional settings or ceremonies. Really, they deal with three things, which is responsible use, and it looks like setting, and dosage. And dosage is obviously how much you're taking. The set is the set intention and why you're taking it, and then the setting, which is like the atmosphere that you're taking it in, the environment. And really really that all depends on like who you're doing it with, a sitter. And so I just implore people to really do their research and make sure that you're getting the right information from the right type of people.
Now, in your most recent Fifth Estate documentary, one of the things that kind of stood out to me, and I think you had mentioned it almost right at the end, was the physiological changes you saw from when you first left hockey to where you're at now. And one of the things you had mentioned was your eyes adjusted. What do you attribute to that physiological change? Like, was it ever explained to you why, physically your body changed after all the years and the concussions?
So the eye brain axis is really strong. When there's trauma to the brain, then you can usually see it in somebody's eyes. Okay. They might be off. So checking the ocular system. So that's one of the reasons that was off. And then once you regain brain health, that kind of straightens out. And you learn that from the Carrick Institute clinics, and these clinics are really harp on vestibular and ocular training. And then you can go to them and optimize your eye health and your brain health, and ultimately you optimize your brain health and your eye health follows closely behind. So it's like a snapshot in the brain, basically. So all of those things can realign, and you figure out your brain chemistry, and you can do some pretty amazing things in recovery.
That's amazing, Dan. This has just been wonderful. I guess one final question before we wrap up is getting back to your family, and I know you have two little ones. What happens if one or both decides to come to you and say, "Hey, Dad, we want to get into hockey"? What has your experience in the sport and even maybe some of the changes that you're starting to see in the league? Would you recommend to your children to get back into or to get into hockey, or what would you tell them from a parental standpoint?
Well, I have three young kids under the age of 5, but there's absolutely no way that they're going anywhere near a rink. And my job as a parent is to make sure they feel loved and keep them safe and secure. And I wouldn't be doing that if I introduced them to the sport of hockey with the way that the culture is, both women and men. And so, my son's really into soccer, and that's not a collision sport. It's a contact sport. There's a big difference. Yeah. And so he'll stick with that. But yeah, man, I haven't seen enough to be able to tell me that, that hockey is going to be changing. And I think that hockey's, going to be on a sharp decline here for the next foreseeable future if they can't figure out the equitable access, if they can't figure out the culture, the coaching problem, and if they can't figure out the TBI problem. I don't think that that sport's gonna be excelling, in the near future. So it's unfortunate. It's a great sport.
Yes,
it really is. I love hockey, but the institutions really need to ship up, and Hockey Canada just can't. Parents won't be satisfied with Hockey Canada just highlighting the 9 programs that have failed everybody, without really changing anything or implementing anything. So, yeah, hopefully it changes, man. It's a really great sport, and a lot of these institutions are ruining it. But, hopefully, man. Hopefully.
What could possibly force the NHL's hand? Like, can fans impact, where the culture goes? Like, where does this change essentially start from? Like, one would assume that all the deaths would have triggered something. Your advocacy and some of the other players and wives that have come out and their advocacy. Where does what at the end of the day would force the league's hand to really make a fundamental change to make the sport safer?
Money. They need to lose enough money, and then they'll change. That's it. I mean, it sounds really bad to say. Well, it's the truth.
Yeah.
The only time that they'll do something is if they're losing too much money or registrants, and so that's the only way, man. That's why Steve's case is so huge. If we could really get a big money settlement from him, then I truly believe that stuff will change, because they just can't survive that. Because it's not just Steve's case, and it's mine, then it's Nick Boyden, and then it's Todd Ewan.
Yes.
There's a lot of cases waiting in the wind.
So it's more so just a domino effect eventually that it might just eventually just force the league's hand. Now, is there still that old time, like, and you and I were having this conversation offline yesterday where I found myself in this debate where maybe it's because people were just missing hockey, but there still seems to be a fan appetite for that rock'em sock'em hockey. What would you say to a fan to maybe impact how they see it? Like, and maybe if we impact enough fans and change what they want out of hockey, that maybe that could also impact from what the product is as a whole.
A lot of people ask me that, and I've really come to the idea that, I mean, it's not about it. Fans can't really do anything about it. People love to see violence. They love it, because it breaks you out of this monotony that is life. And we're animals with lizard brains. Like, we love violence, man, and that's not going to change. So the only thing that has to change is that you tell the players the truth. The risk of repetitive head trauma, which they do not do.
Yes.
They do not do that. And so once they tell them the truth, then it's okay. Fans can indulge, because that guy that all these guys on Twitter say, oh, he knew the rest. Nobody told us anything.
Yeah.
And they still don't. So they don't know the risk. So that's where I have a problem with it. But again, it's on these leagues, and then it goes back to Steve's case. We gotta really stick it to them, and I think it'll change the world. I really do.
And I think as much of I've always been watching hockey. I remember back growing up going to watch the Oshawa Generals, and junior hockey was a big thing. But looking back on it, watching 15, 16, 17-year-olds and watching adults cheer them on and fighting, I know those early concussions really set the tone for a lot of these players, don't they?
Yeah. We know cumulative trauma is an issue. And that's nothing more than, daddy living through his son. Yeah. Daddy didn't make it, so go and suffer, son, for my entertainment. And it sucks to say, man, like, there's a lot of really great hockey fans that are new to the game that have a head on their shoulders, but for the most part, again, you're speaking to the animals, right? The lizard brains. And that's one of the big reasons why the NHL they refuse to move on anything, because they're so fearful of losing those fans from Calgary, losing those fans from Edmonton, the old school cowboy mentality.
Yeah.
But as long as they keep catering to those fans, they'll never break into new markets. As long as guys keep slashing each other on the top of the head, they'll never get a TV deal, and they'll keep losing money. So it's on current players too.
Yes.
It really is.
No, it's quite crazy. Like, I remember what changed me. There was two fundamental instances that really changed my outlook on fighting in hockey. One was watching Nick Kypreos lay completely unconscious on the ice, and the similar, more recent one would have been the George Peros. That I think there wasn't much time after that he ended up choosing to retire. So those major instances you can't unsee, and I think have really impacted the way I look at fighting. And I prefer where the game seems to be going very slowly with the Connor McDavids and the Austin Matthews. But there does seem to still be a small pocket of hockey fans that still want that same, that are still looking for that same level of blood, which, I guess still disappoints me. And, I'm just boggled at the insistence that there still needs to be that for entertainment.
Yeah. Things are changing, and the game's really amazing. The athletes are super athletic, and I think some of the best athletes in the world. Melding cardio with agility, and we just and again, it's like, it's not on us. It's on current players. Current players, like, they most of them still want this in the game, and so they have to really get educated before they can make an educated decision as to keeping it in the game.
Yes.
So that's where the education piece comes in.
Well, you know what, Dan? This has been great. I do have one final question, because I know just recently, you had mentioned that you're going to be launching your own podcast. Kind of let our listeners know, what that podcast is going to look like. When they can start looking out for, your first episode, and kind of just let us know, what the next maybe few months look like for Dan Carcillo in all the work that you're currently doing.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for giving me the opportunity. So it's called the Daniel Carcillo Journey. You can find it wherever you find podcasts. And it'll just be longer form discussions about mostly brain health and overall well-being with interesting people, with doctors, with physicians, with neuroscientists, CT pathologists, comedians, musicians, and really just anybody that I've met along this journey and I call this active recovery. And just expanding on the ideas that you see on 140 characters that I usually get a lot of flack for, just really highlighting things I'm passionate about, which number one is brain health and TBI, mental health, neurodegenerative disease, how to stave it off, and touching upon diet, nutrition, and intermittent fasting, and just a whole host of things, really, and bringing people along on this journey of recovery and really excelling at life and showing people how to heal and just take their own personal wellness into their own hands.
Well, thanks very much, Dan. This has been a great experience. I know I've learned a lot from our conversation today, and I know our listeners will as well. So thanks very much for this, and we hope to have you back on.
Yeah, man. Yeah, cool. And the first episode will be dropping with Dr. Mike Hart, a doctor who advocates for the use of cannabis on, appropriately enough, 4/20, so April 20th. And then you can tune in and check it out, and I think it'll be a good discussion. But yeah, man, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
No, not a problem. Thanks again.